What happens when a man who fights fire makes a promise to the wild? A promise written not in words, but in ash and survival. This story begins in the heart of an inferno. A wall of orange fury consumed the pine-forested slopes above Lake Tahoe, the Angora Ridge Fire. It had a name, a personality. It was a monster that breathed superheated air and devoured everything in its path. Down on the line, firefighter Jake Riley moved with a grim, practiced economy. His face, smeared with soot, was a mask of concentration. The Pulaski axe in his hands felt like an extension of his arms as he cut a break in the undergrowth. Heat washed over him in waves, so intense it felt solid. The roar was constant, a freight train that never passed. He heard the call crackle over his radio, Captain Rostova's voice, sharp and clear. Engine 3, report your status. Western flank is threatening the subdivision. Jake keyed his mic. Engine 3 holding the line. It's getting hot, Cap. He didn't mention the memory that always surfaced in moments like this. The smell of burning history. The Tamarack Lodge. Another fire, years ago. A call he made. A landmark his grandfather helped build. Gone. A ghost that followed him into every blaze. That's when he saw it. Cornered against a granite boulder, fire closing in on 3 sides. A bobcat. Not a large one, probably young. Its fur was matted, its sides heaving. It wasn't snarling or showing aggression. It was just waiting to die. The animal's amber eyes locked with his. In that moment, protocol evaporated. The subdivision, the fire line, the ghost of the Tamarack Lodge. It all receded behind the suffocating reality of this one small life. He heard Leo Chen, the rookie, shout from 20 yards back. Jake, what are you doing? We have to move. Jake ignored him. He shed his heavy, fire-resistant jacket. It was a clumsy, insane maneuver. He moved slowly, speaking in a low, calm voice he didn't know he possessed. Easy now. Just gonna help you. The bobcat watched him, too exhausted to flee. With one swift, surprisingly gentle motion, he wrapped the jacket around the animal, scooping it up. It was light, barely a weight in his arms. Rostova's voice erupted in his ear. Riley, what is your 20? I need you on that line, not playing veterinarian. Acknowledge. He bundled the creature into the cab of the engine and keyed the mic, his voice flat. Acknowledged, Captain. Returning to the line. The bobcat was taken to the Lake Tahoe Wildlife Care Center. The vets worked miracles. They treated its singed paws and smoke-damaged lungs. They nicknamed her Cinder. She was a survivor. During his downtime, Jake would drive to the center. He never went inside the enclosure. He just pulled up a plastic chair outside the chain-link fence and sat. Sometimes for an hour. He'd drink his coffee and just watch her. Cinder would watch him back from the farthest corner of her space, her tufted ears twitching. A quiet communion between the rescuer and the rescued. He never told anyone at the station about his visits. It was his penance, his therapy. A month later, she was ready. Jake was there, standing beside the biologist's truck as they opened the crate. Cinder bolted without a backward glance, a streak of tawny fur disappearing into the recovering forest. The story should have ended there. The fire was contained. The seasons turned. A year passed. The charred skeletons of trees began to sprout new green shoots. The station returned to its rhythm of medical calls and false alarms. The ghost of the Tamarack Lodge was quieter now. A dull ache instead of a sharp pain. Then she came back. At first, it was just a flicker of movement at the edge of the station's property, where the manicured lawn met the wild woods. A ghost in the twilight. Jake saw her first. He recognized a tiny, V-shaped nick in her left ear from the fire. "It's her," he said quietly one evening in the bay, cleaning equipment. Leo Chen looked up. "Who?" Jake just nodded toward the tree line. "Cinder." Captain Rostova overheard from her office. She stepped out, arms crossed. Her face was skeptical. "Riley, every bobcat in the basin has tufted ears and spots. Don't start building a fairy tale." Jake didn't argue. He just knew. The visits became more frequent. She was cautious, but not scared. She would sit at the edge of the woods, observing the rumbling engines, the shouts of the crew during training, the rhythm of their lives. It was as if she were reacquainting herself. Leo, ever the millennial, was fascinated. He started trying to get a picture, but she was always just a little too far, a little too fast. One morning, the world shifted. It was just after dawn. The sky was a soft blend of pink and orange over the Sierra Nevada. The air was crisp. Jake was running the pre-shift checks on Engine 3. He looked up, and there she was. Cinder. She wasn't at the tree line. She was in the middle of the clearing, not 50 feet from the open bay doors. She walked with a strange, deliberate confidence. She stopped, looked directly at Jake, and let out a soft, chirping sound. It wasn't a growl or a hiss. It was a call. From the tall grass behind her, two tiny, fluffy creatures stumbled out on wobbly legs. Kittens. They looked like miniature spotted versions of their mother. Cinder calmly sat down, wrapped a protective tail around one, and began to groom it, all while her amber eyes remained fixed on the firehouse. On Jake. It was not a random appearance. It was a presentation. Leo came running out, phone in hand, his jaw slack. He started recording, the awe clear in his voice. "No way. No. Way. She's showing them to us. She's introducing them." The video was electric. Leo, with the impulsive enthusiasm of a 23-year-old, posted it to the station's public social media page. He titled it, "Tahoe's Bravest Mom." Within hours, it had thousands of views. By the next day, it was on the local news. The Firehouse Bobcats. They were celebrities. The community was enchanted. But fame is a magnet. It attracts more than just admirers. The first to arrive was a forest green SUV with the seal of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife on the door. A woman stepped out. She was dressed in practical hiking boots and a utility vest. Her long, dark hair was in a neat braid. This was Dr. Ananya Sharma. She did not look charmed. She walked into the station with a file in her hand and an air of clinical authority. She found Captain Rostova and Jake in the main bay. "Captain Rostova, I'm Dr. Sharma. We need to talk about your cats." Her tone was sharp, professional. "First, they are not your cats. They are wild animals. And this," she gestured toward the woods, "this entire situation you've created is a death sentence for them." Dr. Sharma's words hung in the air, cold and heavy. "You are habituating them," she continued, her gaze unwavering as she looked from Rostova to Jake. "You're teaching a predator that humans mean safety. That's how they end up as roadkill or get shot when they wander into someone's backyard looking for an easy meal." Jake felt a defensive anger rise in his chest. She remembers me. She knows this is a safe place. Dr. Sharma gave a short, dismissive laugh. "You're anthropomorphizing, firefighter. You're projecting human emotions onto an animal whose only instinct is survival. The safest thing for them is for you to be a source of fear, not food or comfort." As she laid out the strict protocols, no interaction, no feeding, actively scaring them away if they approached. Leo Chen was in the back, hunched over his tablet. He had been using the station's small drone for a training exercise earlier, getting aerial views of the property line. Now, bored by the lecture, he was reviewing the footage. He zoomed in, tracing the game trail Cinder had used. He followed it deeper into the woods on his screen. Then he stopped. He leaned closer, his brow furrowed. He magnified the image. His face went pale. He shot up from his chair and burst into the tense meeting in Rostova's office. "Captain, Jake, you have to see this." He shoved the tablet into Jake's hands. On the screen, nestled in the pine needles and nearly invisible, was a loop of wire glinting in the sun. A crude snare, and right next to it, pressed deep into the soft earth, was the clear, unmistakable print of a heavy work boot. Before we continue, let us know from which city you are. We are interested to know from where our videos are watched. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your rating. This gives us motivation to make new and interesting videos. So, let's get started. The image on the tablet was sharp, cold, and undeniable. Captain Rostova leaned in, her professional composure hardening into a flinty edge. "Where is this, Chen?" she demanded, her voice low. Leo pointed a trembling finger at the screen. "About 200 yards northeast of the property line, Captain, on that old game trail." Dr. Ananya Sharma looked at the image, and a flicker of something, not surprise but grim validation, crossed her face. "Poacher's snare. Cheap, effective, and illegal," she said, her voice clipped. "My warning wasn't a hypothetical exercise, Captain. It's a reality in these woods." Jake said nothing. He stared at the wire loop, the twisted anchor, the disturbed pine needles. This was what the biologist's cold logic looked like in the real world. A metal claw hidden in the grass, waiting. His protective instinct, which had been a quiet hum for the past year, was now a screaming siren in his head. The ghost of the Tamarack Lodge whispered a familiar, bitter accusation. "You see? You can't protect anything." Rostova was already on the phone, reporting the finding to the county sheriff and the Fish and Wildlife game wardens. "Yes, we have geocoordinates," she said, her voice pure business. "No, my crew will not disturb the scene." She hung up and looked directly at Jake, whose muscles were coiled as if ready to spring. "You heard me, Riley. That's a crime scene. We let the wardens handle it." Jake's hands clenched into fists. Handle it? By the time they get a team out here, that cat could be... He couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Sharma stepped between them. "He's right, Captain," she said, surprising Jake. "Response time on this can be slow, and a poacher with one snare likely has more. But," she added, turning her direct gaze on Jake, "going out there yourself is the worst thing you can do. You'll contaminate the area and alert whoever said it." Her logic was infuriatingly sound. Jake felt trapped, a firefighter ordered to watch a house burn. Powerless. The station, once a beacon of safety, now felt like the center of a target. Miles away, in a cluttered workshop smelling of grease and stale coffee, Silas Thorne ran an oily rag over an old hunting rifle. A small black and white television flickered in the corner, broadcasting the local noon news. The cheerful face of a reporter appeared. And the community continues to be captivated by the firehouse Bobcats, who seem to have adopted our local heroes. The screen showed Leo's viral video of Cinder and her kittens. Silas let out a grunt of contempt. "Adopted," he muttered to the empty room. "Tame pests is what they are." He hated it all. The firefighters he blamed for letting a backburn get too close to his property line years ago. The environmental rules that stopped him from logging his own land. And now, these coddled animals, famous for being near the very people he despised. He had walked his trap line this morning. The snare Leo had spotted was empty, the ground undisturbed except for his own tracks. "Waste of time," he grumbled, clicking off the TV. But the news report planted a seed. Famous cats. A mother that wasn't spooked by people. Easy. A prime Bobcat pelt could fetch a few $100s. Not a fortune, but enough. And the satisfaction, that would be priceless. A tense, unspoken agreement settled over the fire station. Officially, they were to do nothing. Unofficially, they became guardians. Leo's training flights with the drone now had a specific purpose, as he systematically scanned the woods around the station each morning. Captain Rostova never asked to see his flight logs. Jake took to performing perimeter integrity checks. Long walks along the station's border that always seemed to extend just a little farther into the woods. He found and dismantled 2 more of Silas's snares, crushing the wire loops under his boot heel and burying them. He started leaving a 5-gallon bucket of fresh water near the tree line, telling the crew it was for rinsing off dusty equipment. No one questioned it. Cinder and her kittens seemed to sense the heightened vigilance. Their visits became more predictable, timed to the quiet hours of early morning and late afternoon. For the firefighters, seeing them was a daily dose of heart-stopping anxiety and profound relief. There she was. They were okay. For one more day, they were okay. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. The afternoon was warm and still, the air thick with the scent of pine. The station was quiet, the crew catching up on paperwork. Cinder appeared at the edge of the woods. But she was wrong. Her movements were jagged, frantic. She let out a series of short, distressed chirps, pacing back and forth along the tree line, her head constantly turning back towards the forest. Jake was the first one out of the bay, his stomach turning to ice. "Leo, grab the binoculars." The whole crew gathered, a silent, worried audience. Leo focused the lenses, his hands shaking slightly. "I only see one," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Just one kitten. It's huddled right against her. The other one, it's gone." Cinder let out another desperate call, a sound that sliced through the quiet afternoon. There was no answer. The second kitten had vanished. A heavy shroud of guilt fell over the station, smothering the easy camaraderie. The laughter in the kitchen ceased. The banter over engine checks evaporated. It was all replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. Jake was the worst. He was a storm cloud of self-recrimination, pacing the bay from end to end, the burn scar on his forearm a livid white against his skin. "I did this," he said to Rostova, his voice ragged. "I brought them here. I made them comfortable. Sharma was right. I put a target on their backs." The failure felt identical to the Tamarack Lodge fire. A catastrophic misjudgment born from a place he thought was good. He had failed to protect. Again. Leo tried to reason with him. "Jake, we don't know what happened. It could have been an owl, a coyote." Jake just shook his head, his eyes haunted. It was the snare, or the man who set it. It's my fault. He was unreachable, lost in a private hell of his own making. Rostova watched him, her pragmatism warring with a deep, maternal concern for her firefighter, who was clearly unraveling. The sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant, mocking colors. The dread of the coming night was a physical weight. Another night for the lost kitten to be alone in the dark. That was it. Jake couldn't take it anymore. The helplessness was worse than any fire. He snatched his truck keys from the hook by the door. A plan, reckless and half-formed, was taking shape in his mind. Find Thorne's property. Confront him. Make him talk. Rostova stepped in his path, her body language leaving no room for argument. Where do you think you're going, Riley? To find that kitten, he bit out. No, she said, her voice dangerously calm. You're going to get yourself arrested for trespassing or worse. You're emotional, you're compromised, and you are a liability right now. Stand. Down. For a heartbeat, the air crackled with defiance. Jake's jaw was set, his eyes blazing. He was a breath away from disobeying a direct order, from throwing away his career. Then the fight went out of him. A wave of utter defeat washed over him, and his shoulders slumped. She was right. He walked back towards his locker, the crew watching him in silence. He wasn't reaching for his jacket. He pulled out his phone. His fingers felt numb as he scrolled through his recent calls until he found the number. Dr. A. Sharma, CDFW1 Mom. He stared at it, his pride warring with his desperation. He had to save that kitten. He had to try to fix what he had broken. Swallowing hard, he pressed the call button and lifted the phone to his ear, the sound of it ringing echoing the frantic beat of his own heart. The ringing in his ear felt unnaturally loud. A voice, crisp and wary, finally answered. Sharma. Jake took a breath. Dr. Sharma, it's Jake Riley. There was a pause on the other end. I'm aware of who you are, firefighter. Is there an issue? The formality was like a wall of ice. He had to break through it. Yes, he said, his voice low and urgent. One of the kittens is gone. She's been gone for hours. Cinder is... She's frantic. Another silence. When she spoke again, the clinical edge was still there, but it was thinner. And what exactly do you expect me to do about it, Mr. Riley? I warned you this was a possibility. This was it. The moment of truth. Pride be damned. I know, Jake said, the words tasting like ash. You were right. I was wrong. I put them in danger. But right now, a kitten is missing in those woods. And I think the poacher got it. You know animals. I know this terrain. Help me. Please. The plea hung in the air. He expected a lecture, a refusal. Instead, after a long moment, he heard a sigh. I'm 20 minutes out. Meet me at your station, and don't do anything stupid before I get there. Dr. Sharma arrived not in her official SUV, but in a dusty personal pickup truck. She wasn't wearing a uniform, just worn jeans and hiking boots. She looked less like a biologist and more like what she was, a person who spent her life in the wild. She wasted no time on pleasantries. Show me where you last saw the mother. Jake led her to the edge of the woods. Cinder was still there, a small, desperate shadow pacing in the falling dusk. Sharma watched the Bobcat for a full minute, her expression unreadable. She's staying close to this area, she said, more to herself than to Jake. That's good. It means the kitten might be nearby. She's not expanding her search pattern yet. She knelt, her eyes scanning the ground with an intensity that amazed Jake. She wasn't just looking. She was reading a story written in broken twigs and disturbed soil. We're not looking for the poacher right now, she stated. We're looking for a kitten. Small, curious, easily trapped. Forget the snares for a moment. Think like an animal. They moved into the woods, a silent, tense pair. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows through the trees. Dr. Sharma moved with a quiet, fluid grace. Jake followed, his firefighter training kicking in, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. He noticed things he'd missed before. The way a patch of moss was scuffed, a single small track in a patch of mud. An hour passed. Full dark was closing in. Despair began to creep back into Jake's mind. They were too late. Suddenly, Sharma stopped. She held up a hand for silence. Listen. Jake strained his ears. Over the chirping of crickets, he heard it. A faint, high-pitched whimpering sound. It was weak, but it was there. They moved toward the sound, their pace quickening. It led them to a small, overgrown gully, a dumping ground for construction debris left over from decades ago. The sound was coming from a large, rusted metal culvert pipe, half buried in the dirt. The kitten had crawled inside and gotten stuck. It was wedged deep in the narrow pipe, too frightened and exhausted to back its way out. Cinder was nearby, her chirps growing more frantic as she heard her baby's cries. Dr. Sharma shone a flashlight into the pipe. He's alive, but we can't reach him. The pipe is too narrow and he's in too deep. Jake's mind went into professional mode. This wasn't a poacher. This was a technical rescue. It was what he was trained for. "Keep the light on him," he ordered, his voice steady and confident for the first time in days. "Keep him calm." He sprinted back to the station. The crew was waiting, their faces etched with worry. "Leo, get me the small hydraulic spreaders, the jaws of life, and a cutting torch, just in case. Rostova, I need floodlights at the gully now." There were no questions, just action. Within minutes, the gully was bathed in stark white light. Cinder had retreated to the shadows, watching with wide, luminous eyes. Jake, wearing protective gloves and glasses, knelt by the pipe. This was his world. Metal, pressure, leverage. He worked with a surgeon's precision, using the hydraulic spreaders not to rip the pipe open, but to gently, carefully widen an opening a few feet from the trapped kitten. Metal groaned. The kitten cried out in fear. "Easy, easy," Jake murmured. He reached into the opening he'd created. His arm scraped against the rusted metal, but he ignored it. His fingers brushed against soft fur. He got a gentle grip and slowly, carefully, began to pull the small, trembling body free. He emerged from the gully holding a dusty, terrified, but completely unharmed kitten. He walked to the edge of the light and knelt, placing the kitten on the ground. It stumbled for a second, then ran directly to its mother, who immediately began grooming it with frantic intensity. Dr. Sharma walked up beside Jake. She was quiet for a moment, watching the reunion. "That," she said, her voice holding a new note of respect, "was impressive, Riley." Jake just nodded, the relief so profound it left him breathless. The victory was sweet, but the larger threat remained. Now, they were a team. "Okay," Jake said, turning to her. "We saved the kitten. Now let's go hunt a poacher." The alliance was forged. Dr. Sharma provided the tech. 3 state-of-the-art, motion-activated trail cameras with cellular uplinks. Leo provided the expertise, finding the perfect spots to conceal them, camouflaging them so they were invisible to a passing glance. He synced their feeds directly to Dr. Sharma's laptop and the station's main computer. The trap was set. They didn't have to wait long. The next afternoon, an alert pinged on Leo's phone. "We got him," he whispered. On the screen, a crystal-clear image showed a man with a weathered face and a permanent scowl. Silas Thorne. He was resetting the very snare Jake had dismantled. Another alert came an hour later. A high-resolution video of Thorne checking a different trap, cursing at finding it empty. They had him. His face, his actions, the GPS coordinates embedded in the image data. It was a digital coffin. They didn't confront him. They simply compiled the files, videos, images, coordinates, into a secure folder and emailed it to the lead game warden and the county sheriff. The evidence was irrefutable. 2 days later, a sheriff's patrol car and a fish and wildlife truck rolled quietly up Silas Thorne's long gravel driveway. There was no drama, just the quiet, efficient process of the law. Silas Thorne was arrested for illegal trapping and poaching on state lands. The threat was neutralized. The dynamic at the fire station changed. Guided by Dr. Sharma, who now made regular, friendly visits, the firefighters learned to be true guardians. The water buckets and food scraps stopped. Instead, they worked with her to establish a protected wildlife corridor behind the station, posting official signs warning against feeding the animals. The Bobcats were no longer a station secret or a social media sensation. They were simply respected neighbors, observed from a distance. Jake Riley was a changed man. The frantic energy was gone, replaced by a quiet competence that felt deeper, more settled. The ghost of the Tamarack Lodge no longer haunted his sleep. He had faced a failure, confronted it, and with the help of an unlikely ally, he had made it right. Months passed. The heat of summer gave way to the crisp chill of autumn, and then to the deep silence of winter. One night, during the first heavy snowfall, Jake stood in the open bay of the firehouse, watching the thick, white flakes drift down. He looked toward the woods, now a monochrome world of white and black. And he saw them, 3 figures moving through the snow. Cinder and her 2 kittens, now nearly grown, sleek and powerful. They were 100 yards away, moving along the tree line. Cinder stopped. She turned her head and looked directly at the fire station. Her gaze seemed to find Jake in the warm light of the bay. It lasted only a moment. There was no chirp, no call. It was a silent, knowing acknowledgement. Then she turned and led her family into the deep, dark woods, disappearing into the falling snow. Jake watched them go, a slow smile spreading across his face. The pact was kept. The debt was paid. And in the quiet heart of the Sierras, he had finally found his peace. Was Jake right to form a bond with Cinder in the first place? Or did his actions ultimately put her family in more danger?